What is up YouTube, and welcome back to a new video in the How to Get Brutally Strong series. It's been a while, but I have a few videos planned out now and I'm excited to bring them to you guys. For the 10th video in this series, we're going to be talking about the GAS syndrome, general adaptation syndrome, and individual differences between people, and lastly the overcompensation principle. So let's get into things. The GAS principle can be seen as the way our body responds to any type of stress. But in this video we are going to be talking about training stress or exercise stress only. And the law states that after an intense period of training there must be a period of rest to allow us to recover. Now, the GAS syndrome is divided into three phases, as you can see here. Phase 1 is the alarm reaction, phase 2 is resistance, and phase 3 is exhaustion. And over here we have the level of stress resistance that we have, which is shown then by the blue line. So in the first phase is where the stressing occurs. So here is our base level of stress resistance. Stress resistance is the amount of stress that we can tolerate without feeling like we are getting low on energy, feeling fatigued, without feeling like we are in a sympathetic state where our fight or flight mode is going on. So when we have high stress resistance, initially that is a good thing. So as the stressor occurs, so our training occurs here, we will see that our stress resistance drops because the sympathetic state is going to dominate. Our cortisol levels are going to increase, so our stress hormone will be released into the blood. Our heart rate goes up, blood pressure increases, fatigue goes up, we will feel tired, low on energy, things like that, which is a sign of fatigue. Muscles will be sore. We can't produce as much force if we try to train, for example, the day after or 2 days after a really hard training. We also see that our adrenaline levels, they increase. So initially we will actually see an energy spike after training, but a bigger drop in energy later because of all these things. Initially, and release of adrenaline is going to increase our energy, but it's very taxing on the body and the nervous system in the long run. After training, we will see the overcompensation principle, which I will go more in depth on later. But basically, we'll see that the resistance, the stress resistance increases, meaning we can handle more stress, which is because our body fights to get out of the sympathetic state. So here adaptation is going on, where we are getting up to a higher level than we were before, because our body is thinking, next time this stress occurs, I need to be able to handle it better. How do I do that? I do that by getting stronger, getting bigger muscles, things like that. And that is what goes on in this phase. But it requires rest, good sleep, good nutrition, good stress management, things like that. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen. Which you'll see up here, like if this lasts for too long, we will get into a state where we might not necessarily feel like we are getting burned out, things like that, because our body begins to get used to that huge amount of stress. But actually we are living with a higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, things like that unconsciously, also poor sleep and bad concentration, but we're not really feeling the huge consequences of it yet. So our body can only mobilize like so much time in a level where stress is high. So even though our stress resistance is high, and higher than before, it doesn't mean that we can just stay in this high stressed period for a while, and we need time to rest and let the stress wear off again. Otherwise, when this stress resistance lasts for too long, we will begin to see like a phase that is called exhaustion, where now we are going to see for every training and things like that, and even small things can cause a huge drop in performance and our ability to resist stress. So this here can also be seen as overtraining, and overtraining, like in the short run, isn't bad because we can get out of it. It is also known as overreaching, but in the long run, overtraining is gonna cause burnout, which is the result of prolonged stress. And what we will see here is a really big rise in fatigue, in stress, and we will see depression maybe, we will see anxiety rises, illness, our immune system gets a lot weaker, and also our stress resistance gets a lot weaker. As you can see here, our stress resistance drops far below our initial level, and this is something we want to avoid. And yeah, this is the general adaptation syndrome, how it works. Just to summarize, the alarm reaction, stress occurs, and initially stress resistance drops, but our body adapts to that by increasing our stress resistance, thinking that next time this occurs I need to be better prepared. And eventually our stress resistance are therefore going to be higher, we can handle more stress, but that doesn't mean we should just be in that high stressed state constantly. Even though we can handle that stress, it's not going to be forever. We need to get rest, and if we don't get that, eventually we'll see exhaustion going on. Our body cannot handle it forever. Eventually our energy reserves will get depleted, and we'll see burnout and a quick fall in our stress resistance. If every one of you watching could quickly do me a favor, that would mean the world to me. For me to be able to continue putting out videos like this and improve the quality and time put into future videos, that requires your help. So if you can either leave a like or a comment on a video, subscribe to the channel, or share my work with a friend, that would be hugely appreciated. For now, back to the video. The next topic I'm going to address for this video is individual differences, because not two people are going to be the same, and you have heard this many times before. I think everyone out in the training space always say this, and so for this video here right now, I'm just going to go a little bit more in depth and come with examples of differences between people, and then provide real life examples of how they dictate volume, frequency and intensity in practice. So some of the examples that we have of factors dictating volume, frequency, intensity and exercise selection as well are height, age, genetics. So especially genetics is a huge one and can dictate how well someone is able to recover, how hard someone can train, things like that. Elite genetics are generally going to allow for a lot more variability and still being able to see results, while someone with less good genetics will have to put in a lot more dedicated hard work, not just in training but also in places like school, for example. Some people will just, without putting in as much effort, have an easier time learning and have more intelligence. Also, we have training history. Training history, in my opinion, is a really underrated one. For example, some people haven't trained a lot with high reps, or they have not trained a lot with low reps, and it might dictate how they want to train in the future, their exercise selections, things like that, or they have trained mostly for strength or hypertrophy. If they want to try to focus on the other part, they might not be able to train the same way as someone who have trained for strength for a long time, even if they are at a good level in the things that they have trained. And even if let's say they are training for strength and they've done that for a long time, but have not done a lot of volume in the strength work, they can't just begin doing that really hard, because it's totally different way of training than they have been used to for a long time. And that also means that the adaptive resistance are going to be really small. They're going to see a lot of directive adaptation for a long time, because their body will see it as a really big novelty. Then we also have jobs of different physical activity and different levels of stress in general are going to impact your volume, frequency and intensity. Then we have limb length, which is a huge one in my opinion, especially as you get more advanced in training. We have tendon insertions, really underrated one, and then obviously training level are going to dictate your recovery, things like that, the type of training that can be effective for you. For example, one of the big ones I've written down here in the bottom is that you might not be able to copy someone's way of training and get results because you haven't developed the necessary general strength and athleticism to get results from this type of training. There are a lot of things out there that require both speed and strength. Like to build speed, for example, like to get really fast, it requires a lot of strength. Even if you develop a high rate of force production, get up to your maximum rate force in a really low time, it doesn't matter if you are extremely strong. So you can't just train for that way in things that focus on that if you haven't also built the general strength first. General strength has to come first, and then we can build up more sport specific things later on. So more examples. I told you that I think high and limb length, things like that are extremely underrated when it comes to determining our volume, frequency and intensity. And one of the examples that really stand out to me are taller people that will be able to handle way less workload in the squat. Someone that is 7 feet tall versus a Chinese weightlifter that are 5'5" with short femurs can't handle as much, because the long legs of the tall people are going to really increase the range of motion that they have in their squat. It might be like 25% longer range of motion for someone that are 7 feet tall rather than 5.5, and that will drastically decrease the workload this person can handle. It might also decrease the intensity and exertion that this person can handle. It might mean that the person will want to use more machines that are less fatiguing, because there's going to be more stress on their spines, things like that, for example, when you are that tall. But on the other hand, they might be better at deadlifts, especially a lot of tall people have really long arms. And I know it's going to be relative, which I will talk about later in the next point example that I've written on the sport. But in general, like a lot of people with long arms are generally good at generating power in the deadlift. So going on to limb length, and here we are talking about like well, relative to the rest of your body. So if you have a huge wingspan, like doesn't matter if you're tall, you can obviously still have a low wingspan, which is not going to make a difference in exercises compared to one that have and not as tall and have a shorter wingspan. It's not going to make a difference in exercise selection, but it's going to obviously make a difference in the amount of work that you can tolerate, as I just described. But with limb length, we might have someone who has a relatively short torso and have long arms and have really long femurs. And for that person, they will be more hip dominant in the deadlift, where the range of motion is going to be decreased, because if you have long arms, you might already be able to reach the bar in this position, right? And then as you pull and pull up, you're going to basically just like have to pull up here, like this short range of motion. So it's going to be extremely small, the range of motion that you have to use. But in the bench press, when you have longer arms, the range of motion is obviously going to be drastically bigger. So this will change like what your main muscle groups are in an exercise. For bench press, if you have long arms, when you get to the bottom, elbows are going to be very far behind. As you can see here, now my elbows are far behind my back. So I'm going to have a lot of time when I push up where it's going to be mainly the chest that is working. And then only up here is going to be the triceps. So my chest is getting a lot more work than my triceps, which means the triceps are probably going to be lagging behind. And then for the deadlift, it is going to be generally my erectors that are going to not work as much, because I don't have to lean forward much to get down and grab the bar. Like I don't have to get all this way down here. So my erectors are going to be getting a lot less work. So what we want to focus on for this type of person in the bench press is going to be working on variations with less range of motion to really target the triceps, and more triceps isolation in general, like over tricep extension, push downs, things like that, to really bring up that weakness. And for the deadlift, it might be things like deep good mornings, or in general things with larger range of motions that forces us into positions where our erectors are going to be challenged, rather than just challenging only our hamstrings, for example, and our glutes. That's how you're going to see differences in that. On the other hand, if we have a person with short arms, let's say my arms are locked out in this position here, right, and I'm already down in the chest here, then it's only going to be this range of motion. Now, this is a really small range of motion, and it's going to be a lot of triceps here, because I might only be working in this position here. So for this person to build up a better base and get stronger, we need to actually work more on the chest. The chest here is going to be the lagging muscle group. And for the deadlift, the erectors are going to be the main thing that is getting trained. So we need to focus more on short range of motion exercises in the deadlift, like rack pulls, and more isolation for the hamstring and glutes. The last example that I've put up here is just how age, job and physical activity all dictate workload and ability to perform. I think especially as we get older, you're going to see a need to change the way that you train, because you're going to lose some muscle and ability to recover. You might not be able to train with especially very high intensity like you have been able to earlier in your life, because maybe of just like sheer stress in your joints, things like that. But you may also be much better off training with more volume instead, to bring blood to your muscles, and that way enhance recovery without always just putting huge loads on your body. And yeah, of course, if you are more physically active during your training, no, not during your training, during your general life or at your job, it can impact how much you can train outside of that. But it can also help you increase your work capacity on the other side. So if you're still recovering properly, it will allow you to handle more work and can actually really speed up recovery. A lot of people like George Hackensmith will talk about how they always went on walks every day and being out working on the farm, things like that, help them recover faster from the workout because it brought blood around in the body to speed up the recovery, especially for the legs. Now there are a couple of ones that are important that I didn't get the chance to put on here because I ran out of space. But one of them is about tendon insertions. And generally, or not generally, all of the time, if you have longer tendons, they will be able to produce more force because tendons work like elastic bands. So when they get stretched out and then have to work the other way, like think of a squat, if you go down explosively, you store kinetic energy, and then the stretch will force a lot of power the other direction. But a longer band, right, will have a bigger chance of also tearing apart. So with a stronger tendon that can produce more force, a longer tendon, it also comes with a bigger risk of injury. And one of the best examples are basketball players. I read about, for example, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who has an Achilles tendon of, I believe, around 17 centimeters, whereas the average length are around 12 centimeters, and he had a really horrible Achilles tendon injury. So obviously you want that kind of stuff to excel at basketball. For example, things where you have to jump high, but it also comes with a risk. And another example are muscle length. So let's take the bicep for example. Like if you have a shorter muscle belly, so the muscle attached further away from the joint, further up on the bone. So let's say instead of attaching here, as you can see, my bicep does attach it around this point here when I contract, right? Let's say it attached all the way up here instead. I would have a much shorter moment down here when I perform curls, and that would allow me to produce much more force in training. That can also dictate volume, frequency and intensity. Now also training level are also going to dictate exercise selection. If you're not extremely strong, you can get away with training exercises that uses a higher load because you're not going to be taxing yourself out as much, while when you get stronger you might not want to train, for example, the Romanian deadlift constantly, but instead move over to good mornings where you are pretty much halving the loads that you can use. Or you might not want to train heavy bench press constantly but move on to Larsen press, extended range of motion, pauses, slow tempo, use more self-limiting variations. So I hope that this gives you an understanding of the things that you have to consider even when making your own program. And yeah, let's move on to the last thing that I'm going to address in this video. The overcompensation principle. This one is very similar to things like stimulus, recovery, adaptation curves and the gas syndrome. You'll see that there are a lot of overlaps between many of these terms within training, but there are going to be slight differences. The overcompensation principle basically is this: our body responds to a significant stressor by increasing its homeostasis and handle that stressor better next time. So let's say we are training and we do 5 reps in the squat at 160 kilos to failure. That is definitely a significant stressor. It is going to cause a disruption in our body's homeostasis. So our body's homeostasis is the base level of strength in our muscle of different hormones we have. So we're gonna have like a certain amount of like contractile fibers, things like that. Let's say blood pressure, things like that. And like now we get like all this lactate in the muscle. We get muscle fibers torn apart. We get way more cross bridges. We will see our like a depletion of our calcium ions because of all the contractions going on in our muscles, things like that. And our body needs to work for that to return to its pre-exercise levels, and to handle that stress next time. Our body will think like, I don't want that to happen again. So for that to not happen again, I'm going to get even better. I'm going to add more contractile fibers. I'm going to improve my ability to activate motor units in the body and fire them at a faster rate, so that when this stressor comes again, it's not going to interrupt with my homeostasis. The body don't like getting its homeostasis disinterrupted because it's where it is comfortable, but by disrupting our homeostasis is the way that we improve our ability in anything here in life, basically. And in the long run, it's a bad thing, but in the short run, and if we recover from it, it is only a good thing. So the requirements for overcompensation to occur, I already talked about the first one, having a big significant stressor early on. So the body's homeostasis has to be disrupted. The body must think, I don't want to feel like this again, so I'm gonna increase my level of homeostasis. The next part, and this one I'm going to talk a little bit more about now, is recovery. So the body needs to return to and increase its level of homeostasis. If not eating properly, sleeping enough, and training hard too early again, the body's energy reserve runs out and it can't resist any longer. Then burnout occurs. So we need to allow our body to return to homeostasis and above before placing another significant stressor. You can't go and lift 165 kilos just 1 or 2 days again, just after your previous training, or at least do that for many times before you will see a decrease in performance, where you'll notice that you begin to have sore legs, achy joints, things like that, and eventually more serious things will happen, such as injuries and generally poor sleep, increased blood pressure, heart rate, being in a constant sympathetic state where burnout has basically taken place. And yeah, let's say now our body has increased its level of homeostasis. We have recovered, now on to step 3, where we need progressive overload or novelty. So the point here is that you should always do something different and never allow your body to figure out your next move, as then adaptive resistance occur. Now adaptive resistance is when we have been doing something for a long time, and in the beginning it is going to work fine, we are progressing well from it, and even though we have done like, let's say 5 reps, 160 kilos one time, it can still be a significant stressor to cause growth for a while, or the same exercise for that sake, like we can then begin to use like different rep ranges, but still the same exercise and see results with that for a while. But eventually our body also starts to think like, now I've done this exercise for so long and I'm starting to get really used to it. I need something new. I need to work in another movement pattern to avoid injuries, to really mix up where the pressure points are coming in the knees, things like that. So in the beginning there are a lot of directive adaptation from doing the same thing over and over again, training the same thing many times a week. But over time, the results that you will see from it starts to decrease because you run into adaptive resistance. And that is where you need to add novelty, like progressive overload can be going on, but eventually you'll need a bigger novelty than just increasing the weight, because you can't do that forever. Eventually you will stagnate, so you might need to change a new exercise or totally different rep range, train a total different motor ability I mean. Instead of focusing on strength, you might want to focus way more on speed, so not training your heavy squats and things like that, but more jumps, sprints for that to carry over to something else, and then later on return to squats, and then you will have synthesized your ability for your body to adapt to that. You'll see that as a novelty, and you'll see a lot of directed adaptation again and be able to reach above your previous level that you had the last time you were at before you saw the adaptive resistance occurring. So this is basically the overcompensation principle. I hope that you enjoyed this video and are gonna tune in for the next installment of videos in the How to Get Brutally Strong series. I'm out.